Okay, so for today's lesson, I'm going to be looking at the role and impact of dissent and how that relates to change and resistance to change. So this is a combining of chapter 4b and 4c as both are kind of interconnected. This is also clearly connected to last lesson as well. So chapter 4a, looking at power structures, as a lot of this video is going to be focusing on the government and its role within a religion and how that's kind of influenced dissent, change and continuity to change. So the Quran, as being seen as a revelation from God, is not open to interpretation. And this is an important point that we'll come back to, which kind of is the reason why the government has such clear restrictions, because they see it as not being open to interpretation. So their interpretation of religion is correct and no one else can challenge it. However, this kind of varies in strict adherence. So some Muslims are extremely moderate in regards to their interpretation of their religion, and they try to fit it into modern times. So what I want to kind of clearly stress, theoretically, the Quran is seen to not be interpreted, but all individuals interpret their religion. So whilst they believe it's not open to interpretation, they do interpret their religion and the Quran. However, Islam, it was built on dissent, and this is a really important point, which is known as ijtihad. Historically, the Islamic community would discuss issues and come to a consensus. So, and this is kind of seen the creation of the hadiths and the Sharia as well. A lot of it was done through consensus. So, historically, Islam has been built on dissent. This is also the case as Islam does not accept blind faith. Muslims are expected to know the Quran and other texts, as well as the reasons and purposes of its philosophy and practices. And again, this kind of connects to dissent, as they need to question. To really understand your religion, you must question it. And so Islam, again, theoretically accepts and encourages dissent. This is also due to the fact that there is a lack of hierarchy and a clear value of equality, both in practice, and therefore is most supportive of dissent. Because there is no hierarchy, you can question what people are saying and kind of have your own interpretations within that. However, even though the hadiths and the sunnah and the sharia were all built on dissent, they kind of, the rejection of secularization by Islamic countries, coupled with the fact that the hadiths and sunnah and the sharia exist, dissent has become widely rejected, as many Muslims now believe that everything has kind of been decided. So because the hadiths are there, because the sharia is there, and because the sunnah is there for guidance, there should be no need for questioning, because everything is there and everything is explained to you. So currently, in a lot of Islamic nations, dissent has become widely rejected. So I'm going to read you a passage from Islam, Resistance or Reform. So the banning of ijtihad has also had serious implications for individual Muslims. If all the relevant interpretations have already been undertaken, people themselves have nothing to do except follow blindly. Individual Muslims thus have no agency themselves. They become simply passive receivers of ancient interpretations and opinions rather than active seekers of truth. And when submissive acceptance of classical opinion is combined with single literal interpretations of the Quran, we get a truly potent brew which sees environments conducive with radical Islam, which is again a point I'm going to come back to, which has been an impact of the lack of dissent. Again, this comes back to the idea that Islam really believes that there should not be blind faith. However, they're contradictory in nature, because if everything has been created for you and there's no need to question, then arguably you are following blindly because you don't understand. So there's clear contradictions within the Islamic world about whether or not dissent should be allowed and kind of its role. So because of that, as that text had said, and I'll go back to that, because of that, as the text says, it's conducive with radical Islam. If you follow blindly with your religion, and you don't understand the beliefs and the values and why you practice what you do, you're just kind of doing it, then it's very easy to have other groups interpret the religion for you and guide you in terms of your own understanding of the beliefs. And again, if you're following blindly, then you might follow their interpretations blindly as well. And so for many Muslims, they see blind faith as being crucial. They see ijtihad as being crucial for not having blind faith. So now we're going to look at continuity as a nature of change, and this clearly is linked to dissent within Islam, and if it's allowed and if it's not. So traditionally, Islam has been very resistant to change. Continuity has had a strong presence in Islam. We can see this in their holistic system with a cardinal framework. So articles of faith, basic injunctions, patterns of norms and values which do not admit any modification with time, which was been written by Sohail and Ayatollah and Gail Boxwell in Islam, Postmodernism and Other Futures. This is clearly seen through the 5 pillars of Islam, as they have continued since essentially the creation of Islam, and they are done exactly the same way since their creation. So since Muhammad claimed Kaaba for Islam, Muslims have faced Mecca to pray, and that has not changed for centuries. So that's clearly continuity is clearly enshrined through the 5 pillars. So Islam has also maintained strong cultural roots in its Arabic origins, and much of Islam's appeal is in its continuity. So lots of Muslims like the fact that it's clear what you do. The 5 pillars are there, and you always do them, and that hasn't changed. And so a lot of the appeal is within that continuity. This is also seen through the fact that Arabic, a language that was spoken when Islam was created, and the language that was written for Islam at the time, is still spoken and used today. So, and you don't find this in any other religion. So the languages, the ancient Hebrew that was used to write the Torah, or the languages that were spoken during the creation of Christianity, most Christians or Jews don't use today. But the same can't be said for Islam and for Muslims. So stability represented in the fact that all Muslims still face Mecca, like I said, and Sharia is another example of this. So for several Islamic nations, civil laws and punishment have been unchanged for many centuries, and so what they're expected to do. So Sharia, when it was implemented, which was in the 9th, 10th century, it hasn't really changed. There's been some minor changes, but it hasn't really changed. So continuity is has clear roots within Islam. However, change is also seen as an integral role in Islam. It is the only religion which has established machinery for the perennial evolution of human society in accordance with the fundamental principles and permanent values of life, which again is a quote from Sohail Ayatollah and Gail Boxwell. This can be seen through the fact, and this is because of the fact that they believe that Islam or religion should be intertwined with daily life, and so there's constant changes within the religion. So, like, if you are on your period, you don't fast. If you are old or sick or young, you don't fast. If there are issues, so if you just can't get to a prayer room or a space to pray, like when you're traveling, you don't need to pray. And so there's lots of changes also. Whilst continuity is has a massive stronghold within the religion, change has also kind of been implemented in the religion as well. So there is an allowance for adaptation. So humans regulate their worldly life in accordance with their time and their environment. And so Islam, in a way, has allowed for these changes. Indoctrinally, it's allowed for those changes. Whether or not that actually happens in reality is another question. The Quran, which, as said, sees no interpretation. However, fiqh is widely seen to be open to interpretation, which is religious law. And so Sharia may be amended according to changing societal needs. So whilst it's already been implemented, and Islamic nations don't see that to be the case, many Muslims see Sharia as being able to amend according to changing social needs. However, going back to what we said before, those changes should be meeting changing Islamic needs, not modern societies that are outside of Islam. However, it is evident when looking at the diversity of Islams across the world, so comparing Turkey with Saudi Arabia, that change is evident within Islam. Saudi Arabia is a very strict Islamic nation, where Turkey, which is an Islamic nation by definition, is not an Islamic nation by societal definitions. They are a secular nation. And so it's clear that Islam has changed for those two countries. And also women and youth are major proponents for change, both to theological understandings as well as Islamic jurisprudence, so Islamic law. There's lots of challenges, especially, again, coming back to the government, because dissent is stamped out for a lot of these nations, because if you are to dissent against the government, if you are to dissent against the government's interpretation of religion, essentially you are challenging their authority and control of the country, and so dissent is not allowed. But as we'll come to see in a lot of the as we'll come to see in the videos that we're going to watch, women and youth are definitely major proponents for change and dissenting against the government. So examples of change brought on by activism, which again we're going to see in some of the videos, is women in Saudi Arabia have just gotten the vote. So they clearly challenged what the government was saying about what they're allowed to do. And again, as we saw in previous videos, they used the Islamic scripture to challenge what the government was saying about what they were allowed to do. As we have already seen, women in Afghanistan have gained reproductive, political and social rights. And again, this has been seen through Rawa and their activism. Also, women in Morocco have had a revision of Islamic family law, creating a new Sharia, again through protests. And also, as we've seen through like the Arab Springs, and both within Egypt and Tunisia, the youth were major proponents for dissenting against what the government was saying and bringing about change. And also, growing rate of adherence around the world is bringing about change through new ideas, because as Islam spreads around the world, there's greater interpretations of the religion based on their own culture. So what Muslims in Australia see as Islam is very different to what Muslims in Saudi Arabia see as Islam. And so through that growing rate of adherence globally, that's kind of bringing in new ideas and new understandings. So just to summarise before we watch the video that looks at how dissent is being challenged within different Islamic countries and how that's impacting on change as well as continuity. To summarise what this has said, dissent is challenged not only because of the texts that have been created within Islam, but also because of the fact that governments are seen as the Islamic interpreters of the religion. For a lot of countries, to dissent means to challenge those governments and to challenge their interpretations. And so for a lot of people, it's stamped out. Because it's stamped out, it makes it really hard for a lot of countries and a lot of Muslims to change their religion. And again, this comes back to the idea that the Quran is not open to interpretation. So if you wish to change it, you are challenging the Quran and what it says. So change continuity is a massive constant because of that inability to dissent against interpretation. However, with that growing adherence around the world and through the different interpretations that brings, change is kind of opening up, and dissent again is growing. So there's clear connections between dissent and change within Islam. And again, the pushes for change and who allows it and who doesn't really impacts on the religion and how it's followed, and impacts on the people who follow it as well. So now you're going to watch a video on in Edpuzzle again, so similar to chapter 3D. So you need to go to Edpuzzle as well, and the video is called. The video looks at Saudi Arabia, and it's going to look at the Saudi government and how it deals with change and dissent.